We knew this day was coming. And the collective we that I'm using here refers to Sanders supporters. We knew that at some point they would ride out, that they would marshal their forces, and then they would use whatever they had at their disposal to hit us and to hit our particular candidate. They find him to be an existential threat to the way that they run politics. And even from the standpoint of media, you have a bunch of millionaires all throughout media, for the most part, that are not engaged with what Sanders is saying because ultimately it doesn't materially benefit them in the way that it materially benefits the masses. We knew this day was coming. A lot of us didn't necessarily think, however, it would start off with Warren. Meaning, the story that came out in Politico, and then Warren leans into it, this notion that Sanders, her friend, was trashing her. To the chagrin of many of us, he refused not to do that. And even when he was losing because she was aping him, he still refused not to do that. But supposedly, in the most illogical of campaign strategies, he decides to change his campaign strategy when he is winning Iowa, winning New Hampshire, has pulled up to 1 point behind Joe Biden in Nevada, is outright winning California, meaning he is on a surge at the point where the elections are starting to be held. Warren has outright, utterly, and entirely, fantastically, almost all at once collapsed. And we're to believe that for whatever reason, he changes his campaign strategy, the strategy that has given him what he's wanted and has positioned him this well in order to attack Warren. I'm sorry, it doesn't quite pass the smell test to me. It doesn't quite make sense logically. This is kind of like the Assad thing. Assad gets 90% of its territory back, and the first thing they say is he gasses people. And you're like, well, why would he do that considering he got all his territory back? They say he's a bad guy. It's as if logic doesn't quite play into the decision-making process. And that is, of course, nonsense. It makes no sense for Sanders to do that because Sanders didn't do that. She leans into that story, though. Then she leans into the story further by either her or her sources, meaning anonymous, people who are around her, leaking that Sanders told her in a meeting 2 years ago that a woman couldn't beat Trump. Now, her sources eventually said this, anonymous sources, people who weren't in the room, because the only two people who were talking were Warren and Sanders, and the only person who could have leaked this was Warren. Sanders said this is a lie, that didn't happen. People, meaning the Washington Post has sources that says that didn't happen. They did have this conversation in 2018. They did have this conversation about a woman running. Sanders made the point that Trump is sexist and would use that as a weapon to go after the candidate. Now, whether Warren interpreted this as Sanders saying a woman can't win, or whether she's just outright lying, I don't know which. She doesn't want to talk about it. She doesn't want to add context to it. She just wants to throw it out there that Sanders says a woman can't win. Essentially, Sanders is sexist, and now I don't want to talk about it. I would prefer you guys talk about it. I just want to talk about policy now. Stabs him in the back. Not everybody is buying the story, though, because the story doesn't quite make sense. Sanders has a track record of pushing and supporting women. Sanders tried to get that same Elizabeth Warren to run in 2016. It's really peculiar that 2 years later he tells her that a woman couldn't win, considering that 2 years prior he tried to get her to run. And also, it doesn't quite spell the mustard test that Warren would say, I'm running for office, and Sanders says a woman can't win. That's really strange and odd. Warren could have handled this all sorts of ways if she wasn't the originator of the leak, or if she didn't necessarily want to take advantage of the leak. Again, the only place the leak could have came from was her, seeing as it was her and Sanders. And yes, it was anonymous sources that was talking to CNN, but ultimately it originated from her campaign. She could have said Sanders is a friend of mine, and Sanders, we had a conversation. He told me that Trump would use sexism as a weapon, but I don't want to discuss the conversation further. She could have tried to drop it. She leaned into it, which is the point that I'm trying to make. The story doesn't make sense. And other sources, other than CNN, have noticed that this story doesn't make sense. One of those sources, one of those bright spots, Morning Joe. Morning Joe is trashing this story because they're making the very basic point that I made. Logically, it doesn't make sense. Sanders says that's a lie. His campaign said that's a lie. Elements of The Washington Post said that didn't necessarily happen. It never said that. And Warren wouldn't add specific context to what was said. It boils down to, who do you believe? You believe the Native American Elizabeth Warren, or do you believe the guy who has a track record of honesty? I'll believe Sanders. Morning Joe, Al Sharpton. People who, by the way, meaning Al Sharpton has not necessarily been an entire friend to Sanders. Go look back at 2016. But even Al Sharpton notices this doesn't make sense. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, subscribe. You can always support PayPal, Patreon. We like to say even $1 helps because this content gets instantly demonetized. For the last couple of days, this issue with Warren has been all over the place. Refund Warren is still trending. Right here. I Trust Bernie was trending yesterday. This gets across that you may have made a miscalculation in putting this story out to attack Sanders like this, considering that for the most part he has refused to attack you. On the Nevada poll, Sanders pulling within 1 point of Joe Biden. Morning Consult article, why Bernie Sanders is electable too. And it makes the point that even though Biden is getting the black vote, he's getting the older black vote. The younger black vote is going to Sanders. And it even makes the point that Sanders has started to make inroads even within that. It makes the point that even though Sanders is weak with the elderly, and yes, he's weak against Joe Biden with the elderly vote, and the demographics that you need, independents, people who are no college degree, poor or middle class, Sanders gets those demographics, meaning he gets the people that they need to win. Sanders surging in California in the latest poll, up 10 points to take the lead in California. There were other polls, Capitol being another one showing Sanders in the lead in California. I guess my point is, he's in lead in Iowa, even in the averages. He's leading in New Hampshire, even in the averages. He's leading in California, or at the very least in second place if you're talking about the averages, but only by like 0.2. He's pulled up to 1 in Nevada. He's surging. He's surging. In comparison, Warren is not. Because people know that, and because that's obvious to people, they see this for what it is. Listen to Morning Joe.
They say, I don't think a woman can win, Elizabeth. Come on, who's going to say that?
And he certainly wouldn't say it to Elizabeth Warren.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Who's going to say that?
It is very doubtful, but I think you hit the real problem. The gravity of what is going on right now, where we are really seeing a challenge in the balances of power in the three branches of government. When we are seeing a president literally lie about why he ordered the killing of a general and how that affects us on a global level. And we're arguing about a living room conversation 2 years ago, and I hope that's not what we debate about tonight in the Democratic debate.
Yeah.
It's like we're missing the whole point of where we are in American history.
Adrian Elrod, what is the strategy here on the part of Elizabeth Warren bringing this up now?
Well, Mika, I think that she is realizing that her campaign is in a solid 3, and sometimes in some states 4th place. And she needs to gain some traction. I mean, I'm a little surprised.
Again, what's the strategy, though? I mean, I have to tell you that I don't think this is an opportunity to gain traction. I think it actually takes things in the opposite direction.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that she put out a statement last night because that just added more fuel to this, this fire, essentially, that's happening here. But I don't know what the strategy is. The only thing that I can think of is that she needs to climb into 2nd place, or she needs to get some Bernie Sanders supporters, and she maybe thinks this is a good play for women that she can get.
Right there. It's obvious. She's failing miserably. She's essentially a man falling through tree branches, just grabbing, trying to get any particular tree branch before it hits the ground. And throughout this, essentially, Sanders, my friend, is sexist. But I don't want to talk about it. Yes, she's trying to claw away some of his support, especially the female support. If you can make this argument that Bernie Sanders is sexist, it puts a headwind in trying to have women associate themselves with Sanders. But that doesn't have legs. And I got to be honest, this reeks of desperation. It reeks of desperation. And the only person this really helps is Joe Biden. I mean, think about it for the moment. Warren, who got into this campaign saying she wants big structural change and saying that Sanders and Warren supposedly were working in tandem. But the only reason they were working in tandem is because Warren didn't want Sanders attacking her, exposing the fact that she is just aping him. I hope you understand what I mean. It's a marriage of convenience. If she goes after Sanders, Sanders may go after her and may expose the fact that all of these policy positions that she just pretended to be taking on because she wanted to pretend to be Sanders with a vagina were baloney. He never hit her from the left. He never attacked her at all. He, for the most part, left her alone, and they've worked in tandem. But now you see the real Warren. Cory Booker, whatever you think of him, came in with a quiet dignity and left the way he came in with a quiet dignity. Warren, a failing campaign, has decided to attack somebody that she openly calls a friend and that has never attacked her. This is seen for what it is. Seen for what it is. A shallow, failed play at trying to attack Sanders. McCoy Williams, good argument, but Morning Joe is trash though. Oh, this is not a rah-rah Morning Joe. It's just making the point that even the staff of Morning Joe can see it. I mean, Al Sharpton, who's not been a friend to Sanders, Joe, who is a Republican, Mika, I think she's a Democrat, but ultimately they're looking at this like, this doesn't make sense. What does she think this is going to do? And yeah, I suspect that all of this boils down to, I've lost a share of my vote total to Sanders. I've shown this before. You can see it for yourself. Look at this. Warren going up. At her height, Sanders never attacked her. Look at this. Falling stone. As she went up, as she goes down, Sanders goes up. Buttigieg also gets a bump. But look at Sanders. He spikes. Now, it's possible that she thought, well, the issue is I need to get some of my vote from Sanders. Or at the very least, try to get those people to come back, especially if those people were women. And maybe I can use this attack to try to say that Sanders is a closet sexist. He's a closet sexist. This is disgusting. And this will backfire. Like McCoy Williams. I say Warren will be out by March. McCoy, this does reek of desperation. It just does. It just does. I am curious about what they're going to talk about tonight. I suspect they probably try to bury it. I don't necessarily think Sanders wants to deal with issues of sexism. By the same token, it seems like Warren is trying to backpedal from this because it has had negative consequences. The refund Warren thing, where people have been trying to get refunds back from Warren, the Sanders supporters that use Warren as a number two, to the chagrin of other Sanders supporters, getting to the point of saying, oh, this is disgusting. I can't believe she's done this. I can't support her now. Like, this has had consequences. Like, share, subscribe. Too bad Tulsi is not on that debate stage tonight. Too bad.